One of the first topics I'd love to dive into was the recently released Chris Bumstead and Hardy Rambod interview. I mean, what can we say about Chris that hasn't already been said? I was always kind of a little bit critical of this guy before, and I'm still not really totally on board with the classic physique division. But you can't argue that Chris is a guy that is humble and hardworking. He's already secured 5 Olympias. He seems to have the winning formula and the winning package. But what was your take on this particular interview?
Chris did really open up. He's a fantastic bloke. You know, he's very, very talented, obviously. And it seems that his life now is really, really sort of in order after the last couple of years of a bicep tear and a lat tear. And they seem to have almost got a winning formula, those two. So Chris is going to be extremely dangerous this year. He's super focused. He's content in his life. He's got a new baby daughter, very supportive wife, and his businesses are going well. So it all came through in the interview, and I reckon it could look his best ever, and that's his goal.
Yeah, well, this can go 2 different directions for Chris, because he's definitely transitioned into a new phase of life with fatherhood, and I think that was the theme of this particular video.
That's right.
Because it is a huge step, and it's a huge impact on anybody's life, let alone a bodybuilder that needs to have that selfish 365, 24/7 commitment to making themselves numero uno, let alone a child. And one of the things that was quite interesting in the comments is the criticism, not only of the sound quality, but on the naming of the child. Because when he said, I'm taking care of Bradley, I initially thought, hang on, I thought you had a little girl. I didn't know.
Same here.
And people were questioning the naming of this child Bradley. Like, they were saying, who the fuck names a female child Bradley? So that did throw me a little bit. But you can't argue that Chris isn't the most humble and one of the most hardworking people in the sport. I thought it was quite interesting that him and Courtney were both Olympia champs. I didn't know that she also had that level of achievement.
Yeah, that's right.
But he's definitely inspirational, not only in terms of his physique, no matter how unattainable it is, but his mindset. And we speak about that quality quite often among bodybuilders, and the level of work that he does with himself to make himself a better person, not just physically, but in all aspects of his mind, body, and soul. For me, is very inspirational.
Oh, for sure. And well, he's got a therapist, a sports counselor that he sees. He seems to be making some good inroads with her. And when he speaks about his mindset and his attitude, it's really good. I mean, it's not surprising that he's got 24 million followers on Instagram and he's got 4 million subscribers on YouTube. So that's actually part of his business. Well, there's 2 of his businesses there. And then he's got Revive. And of course, he's got C-Bump supplements. So it seems that all those things are going really well at the moment. And, you know, he seems super happy. But it's great that he actually pursues some counselling. I think that's testimony to how strong.
Yeah, he's definitely played his level of celebrity right, because in years past or decades past, you had bodybuilders that just counted on their sponsorships, just counted on their meager contest winnings. And by the time bodybuilding was all over, they didn't have a pot to piss in at the end of the day. And a lot of them had to make all these unprovoked comebacks just to earn a little bit of coin in the sport. But Chris is going to retire a very, very healthy man. It's funny with the social media numbers, because one of the questions I wanted to put to you is whether Chris, after bodybuilding, say 10 to 20 years from now, will he be one of those enduring icons for the ages, or will he be relegated to those forgotten names of the past, where people will bring him up in conversation going, I remember that guy called Chris Bumstead that was one of the classic physique champions. This is the thing, because I was even having this conversation with the historian that I interviewed yesterday, and we were talking about Rich Piana, funnily enough, that we also spoke about last week, and how he was so popular social media-wise, and also as the biggest thing on the internet and YouTube at the time. But now he's never brought up again in the conversation. He's basically been forgotten. So what do you think of it in terms of Chris?
Yeah, well, people are very fleeting, and they're, well, as we know, their attention spans are very short these days, so they tend to sort of go from one thing to the next. But I think, yeah, it's a fascinating question. Because he's so popular, you would hope that obviously his fans would linger on, but it all depends what he does. If he keeps giving back like Jay Cutler does, well, then he's got a chance to be very popular for a long time, because Jay Cutler still is. So Jay Cutler's probably the best example I can think of, who's still very relevant. So Chris could stay relevant, but it just depends on what he decides to do. If he gets into some sort of media, he could be. He's a good-looking guy. He could be quite good at the shows, commentating, continuing to promote the sport in some way with his businesses.
Where does he choose his path to go after
That's
bodybuilding?
right.
Whether he wants to keep one foot in the sport and become a commentator. He does have everything going for him in terms of his looks and his intellect. He's so
He
well
speaks well.
spoken. He does that introspective work, which is very unique among bodybuilders, because a lot of them are just focused on the outward appearance and they never do any of that internal development.
Yeah.
So Chris has a ton of self-awareness, and I think that is almost the key to success a lot of the time. And it's funny because a lot of people like to compare the physiques of Arnold and Chris over the generations and the eras, when really that's quite a silly way to compare them. But I'm doing a video currently where I'm comparing the psychologies of both guys. And I think that will be a much more interesting analysis, because if you have a look at the psychologies of Arnold and Chris Bumstead, it's almost like comparing chalk and cheese. But
That's right.
Whereas Arnold has been, definitely one of those enduring icons and will never be forgotten in the bodybuilding equation. I wonder sometimes about Chris, because he almost seems to contend that once it's over, he will hang it up and move into the next direction of something else, and will probably be one of those. Because I also think about this. Look at another prominent Olympia, which is Flex Lewis. He is very fast fading from the public consciousness.
He is, and he keep trying. Well, I mean, Flex Lewis was doing his interviews with his Dragon's Lair podcast for quite some time. I think.
Yeah, I haven't seen an upload in months.
No, that's right. So that's fallen by the wayside, and so it's not surprising that Flex Lewis isn't entering into conversations much at all.
Another very intelligent guy. Another guy with many fingers in many pies. Made his fortune. Parachuted out of bodybuilding. A healthy and very rich man. Chris will definitely be the same, but 24 million social media followers. At the end of the day, it's just air. There's nothing solid about social media presence anymore. And this is the reality I think a lot of guys and girls are going to face once they finish up with bodybuilding. One question I want to also put to you, because you're like the Chris Aceto of Australian bodybuilding when it comes to physique analysis and contest analysis. But, I'm not really totally on board with this new classic physique division as it stands in its current incarnation. A lot of people have said that Chris Bumstead is almost the emperor's new clothes of classic physique, because he has the charisma, he has the stage presence, he has the intangibles, but his physique is kind of quite choppy just to me. Now, when I look at somebody like Bob Paris, I think that's classic physique. So if you were to compare Bob Paris versus Chris Bumstead, who has the better representation of what we consider aesthetic classic physique?
Well, I think to the average Joe Blow, it's just looking at the sport that knows a little bit about muscle, bodybuilders and stuff. They say Bob Paris for sure. I mean, what lines he had, and Chris Aceto talks about flow this and flow that, but he definitely had the flow. What's happened with Chris Bumstead in the last number of years, particularly since he's got with Honey Rambod, is Chris has got, I think, wonderful structure and a great shape, but Chris is starting to get gnarly now. He's starting to get the muscle maturity, and he's starting to look, he's starting to get that sort of grainy look to his physique, which is not necessarily what people like, but what the general masses like to see. They like to see, I mean, Bob was definitely there was nowhere near as lean and grainy as Chris, that's for sure. So, when a woman looks at someone that's veiny and grainy, and they just go, ooh, they sort of grimace. But with Bob Paris, I don't think anyone would ever grimace with that physique. But he still had, a good amount of muscle, didn't he? So
beautiful.
I think, yeah. So I just think, and for this sixth Mr. Olympia title that he's chasing with Honey Rambod this year, they were talking about they want to try and get the condition of 2022, the size of 2023, and if they can get a good combination of the two, he's going to be bigger and better again within his weight limit. So that might detract once again away from that Bob Paris look that you were talking about. So
when I look at, I know that he has his own structural flaws, but when I look at somebody like Wesley Vissers, I almost think he kind of represents a little bit more of the epitome of the classic physique. much more than Chris, because Chris's biceps, which is like a hallmark of a classic physique bodybuilder,
Yeah.
there's overwhelmingly glaring deficiencies.
Well, they're short. They're those mid-attached short biceps, even shorter than the legendary Lee Haney's, but he's even taller than Lee, so I think he finds it hard to hide those. But he does make up for it in other body parts. But he has got a great structure, though. I think we'd all agree with. He's kept that waist very small. He's got a fantastic X frame, Chris Bumstead. So.
And at the end of the day, he's good for business. And I can't imagine seeing the IFBB, as much as they are with their chopping and changing of Olympia champions at the moment, relegating Chris Bumstead to second place, unless they really want to make a huge impact in terms of the reaction that would garner. But I think that Chris, in order to cement his legacy as one of the all-time GOATs, he really does need to move up to the Open. And they always tease that year after year. And Sean Ray and everybody else challenges him to do it, because maybe he could be the one that takes bodybuilding in a completely different direction. If he ever steps up to the Open, put on a little bit more weight, fill that frame out, which he still has oodles of potential to do, keep those lines nice and balanced, keep the taper. And he could take bodybuilding into a whole new different direction, away from this kamikaze collision course that everyone is reviling at the moment, with these squat, short, midget, gnarly hobbit physiques that Lunsford and Hardy present. They are not aesthetic at all. And they are a disaster waiting to happen.
Yeah, I agree. I think Chris is, if he filled out, the surprising thing with the whole title of the video, it said, is he going to become a father, move to Open, or retire? But never in the actual 1 hour and 20 minutes did they discuss actually whether he was going to go to the Open. And that was
they did. They teased it, but of course, as always, it's full of bullshit. He's just not at that stage of his life. I think he will do 6 and he's done, and he'll ride off into the sunset. But
you could be right. But by geez, I'd like to see it, because I actually made a note of the fact that I thought he could potentially change the face of bodybuilding to some slightly more of an aesthetic physique, and it's been going that way anyway with Arnold, with his very strict punitive and penalising of the distended bellies, and even gyno and things like that. Even Synthol's being marked down where it never was back in the day. He could potentially change the face of open bodybuilding.
Could change the narrative, but I don't think it'll ever happen, because he also has that health problem lingering in the background, which I think he just wants to check out, with everything intact and healthy. So, but let's move on, because sorry, go for it. Add it on.
I was just saying, he's got an autoimmune kidney issue, which kidneys and anabolics don't go all that well, do they, in time? So I don't know for how long it's going to be healthy what he does. I know he does all his checks with Harney. They're very health conscious, aren't they?
Yeah. And with that, he should also be commended as well. He doesn't put his head in the sand and sort of think, mass at all costs and health be damned, and I'll deal with that when I'm finished. No, he does keep a huge rein on it, which credit to him. He's a good example for kids at the end of the day. So I think he's great with those intangibles behind him. Let's move into the next topic anyway, which is the Mike Israetel appearance on Modern Wisdom. And Mike's a little bit of a regular on that excellent podcast of Chris Williams. Chris Williams, an excellent speaker, knows how to ask the right questions. And this was called a masterclass in fat loss. And it really was. I think I'm also a little bit critical of Mike Israetel at times. I think that he can obfuscate and misuse the science, and I don't agree with a lot of his training principles. And when I definitely look at his physique, oh my God, if you want to talk about train wrecks waiting to happen, Mike Israetel, he is probably one of the richest and popular influencers on the space at the moment. He is extremely intelligent and whip smart, and he's hilarious to listen to if you ever check out his content. But he's on this course of wanting to become a IFBB pro so that he can hang it up pretty soon. He's turning 40. He's a Brazilian jiu-jitsu. He's superb in terms of his ability in other athletic fields. But he just doesn't have the physique. And this is where you can have all the resources and all the money and all the knowledge at your fingertips, but it doesn't always translate into a fantastic physique. And I'll put some pictures up of his past contests to show people just
that'd be
exactly
interesting.
how disastrous he
Yeah.
looks. He just does not have the potential to be an IFBB pro in any sense of the word. However, what did you think of this interview? Because it was extremely information dense at almost 2.5 hours long. And did you have any good takeaway pointers from Mike's, or did you think that it was a load of 2.5 hours wasted?
I did struggle with it for a while there. I was sort of more interested in what Chris Williams had to say as the interviewer. I was switching off a little bit with Israetel, especially when he started talking. He kept interjecting with, "Oh, don't forget about my hypertrophy app," and things like
Oh,
that.
shit, he over-advertised that, didn't he? He made sure he got his money's worth coming onto that
But
show. One of the things that I really like that he brought up, which has been a little bit debated recently, particularly in the carnivore space, is that calories matter. And we're going to get onto a clip later on with Bart Kay, who's really anti-calories in, calories out,
That's right.
as are a lot of the carnivore advocates. But I think that where Mike rings true is that bodybuilders have this down now to an art and a science where if you set out your calories and decrease them over time and record what you're eating, there's almost no surefire better way to get the guaranteed fat loss. And bodybuilders do this with the absolute precision of landing a jet plane. Now, Bart Case says, and others say that calories don't matter, but fuck yes, they do. If you have a structured plan and follow it to the T, consistency being a superpower that Mike Israetel also said, you will get to the promised land for the physique that you want on the day that you want. But another thing I really liked as well was his de-emphasis of cardio being so crucial to the fat loss equation, because we have bodybuilders, they're doing 90 minutes, 2 hours of cardio. But he says your step count will probably get you most of the way. And anything else comes down basically to your preference, your enjoyment, the convenience, and the time that you're dedicating it to it. So harder cardio, where people are doing these on the step mill and grinding away for hours and hours, isn't sustainable, but also doesn't really accrue any extra benefit than just simple walking is. And I love how he said that you can multitask when you're doing simple basic steps. You can be doing phone calls or conducting business or listening to a podcast, etc. And the whole concept of the afterburn effect, the epoch, that's largely overrated, which I really believe as well. What's your own thoughts in regards to those things? Because we'll talk about them with Bart K as well.
The less low intensity, steady state cardio. I was always a fan of that on an empty stomach. And I believe that that's what you had to do. And then I thought, well, I was always taught that, it's cardio stimulates your metabolism for the next 24 hours. So, you get all those great benefits. And then and now they're saying that doesn't happen. But I feel like I've had good results over the years, but probably have swayed a little bit towards the idea of, the step count. And
what about your thoughts? What about his thoughts on seed oils? He interjected that seed oils, there's no problems with them at all. And again, this is a hugely contentious issue among a lot of carnivores that don't like using seed oils at all. Mike sort of said that the research doesn't show that there's any negatives, but this is the thing with science sometimes, because, how do you do these epidemiological studies or these studies where you can isolate all the variables and then weigh down on the fact conclusively, as Mike does in this case, that seed oils aren't a problem?
Well, in recent years, I know with my partner Louise, but myself particularly, if I have some fats, some fats that from maybe a cafe that just aren't particularly good, I can tell straight away, because you get that gurgling, you bit of flatulence, but it's really, that doesn't sit well with me in my stomach at all.
One of the other things that I really liked that he mentioned as well is that fat loss should be phasic in nature, because a lot of guys or girls will bite down really hard for a prep, do 12 to 20 weeks of fat loss, which is nothing wrong with it. But the reason why I like the phasic approach, doing very hard, deep dives into very strong calorie cutting, as versus just cutting it slowly, is one of the things that actually throws a lot of people when it comes to cutting weight or dieting is life crops up in the background. And I can almost guarantee that if you're going to do a 12-week prep, that's when so much of Murphy's Law is going to enter the equation. You're going to have all these life challenges of breakups or life events that will want to throw you off course. Life will just throw you all these issues. Whereas if you break up the fat loss over time, so you might do 3 or 4 weeks really hard, have a break. Then when you're ready to go again hard, have a break, keep coming back to it so that it's a bit of a structured longer term, but also you're not consistently clamping down, making it a psychological mission impossible over time. Have you ever tried that phasic approach? Because that's definitely what I like to do.
Yeah, I know a lot of people that I know, like yourself and others, do that. And the funny thing is, I've always been one of those with a slow and steady approach. I've never really had, I've never done big carb days, and I've had the odd cheat meal of things like that, but I've never had 2 days of high carbs, 3 days of low. I have in peak week, obviously, dropped my carbs in the first few days and then increased them slightly after that. But I've basically just stuck to a slow and steady approach. And I found that to be good. So, but it's something that is worth trialing, I think. Something I'd like to give a crack, that's for sure.
Yeah. And I just sort of think with the phasic approach as well is that you can return to some level of normalcy without having to always be in this hard baked in deficit. So I think that it shows to people that this is a steady, bit by bit, incremental approach as much as like gaining muscle is. So we need to be able to sometimes give ourselves a break, rinse off any diet induced fatigue or diet induced hormonal damage, and then get back on the horse when we're good to go. The last thing I really liked about Michael was talking about was this now hotly debated topic of GLP-1 agonists, such as your Ozempics and your all these different glutides that are popping into the equation that apparently make dieting a cinch for a lot of people, because they get on this, it cuts their appetite, and then it almost takes away the addictive potential of a lot of the foods. And I always sort of think, wow, this is going to put a lot of diet gurus out of business, because people can just jump on these GLP-1 drugs and they're going to lose weight. But what do you think of their inclusion into bodybuilding?
Yeah, I'm a little bit concerned because, as you know, with any drug, there's with whatever good it offers, there's usually a whole host of.
There's no biological free lunch, as they used to say.
No, that's right. So I'm a little bit concerned there. But at the end of the day, if you want satiety, why don't you just take out carbohydrates? Because it can happen very easily with a keto diet, a carnivore diet. You can lose that carb addiction, and satiety can be easily achieved, because that's, at the end of the day, there's those Ozempics and stuff. That's what they're offering. I know that people are a bit lazy these days and they want to still have their goodies. So I'm not sold on them. I'm not a fan of them. I don't think they're necessary, and I don't think necessarily long term they're healthy either. Whereas a keto carnivore diet is absolutely healthy long term. And when I'm in the zone of the keto carnivore space, I just haven't got an appetite. I just feel.
Yeah, well, the thing that Mike didn't bring up in the equation, and the thing I did like about, because Chris says, well, wouldn't you consider this cheating, like steroids? And well, Mike says, well, if you have a hot day and you turn on the air conditioning, isn't that cheating? Because there's this continuous appeal to the naturalistic fallacy where people think that if they're not using natural means to achieve something, then there is some kind of fuckery in terms of cheating. But we all use tools and technology to get us to a better place at the end of the day. If you have an enduring headache, you pop a ibuprofen or a Panadol to ease it up. And I think, the GLP-1s do have that potential, especially when there's an addictive nature. And I like how Chris Williamson brought up the topic that with these drugs ever advancing, obesity in the future will no longer be, the sentence that it is for some people's lives. It will be totally a choice whether you want to be obese or not. But I also think, well, does that mean that you have to commit to these drugs for the rest of your life? Like, say, for example, TRT. But we also don't know the long-term downstream effects of taking them. And, there's, again, a few too many question marks for my liking. I never have a problem with hunger on a diet, particularly with keto and like a carnivore approach, like you said, because I always found that hunger is mitigated when you're meeting all your micronutrient needs. So when I'm eating liver and organ meats, as long as my micronutrient boxes are ticked, I don't actually get hunger. What I do find most debilitating on a diet is the level of fatigue, which is only natural, because if you're not getting adequate calories and you're down to 1,000 or 1,200 calories a day, you're going to suffer from an energy deficit more than anything. And that feeling of like you're wading through quicksand every day just to do the regular demands and needs of life is what is the most debilitating. And so far, apart from stimulants, caffeine, and maybe amphetamines, we don't have any kind of drugs which give us that ability to walk on water and the quicksand that diets induce.
No. So your Ozempics won't help you with that. But look, I think, but basically it boils down to insulin as well. If you can control insulin, your blood sugars, that's going to make some huge inroads into, being satiated and not looking to the refrigerator for some goodies.
Yeah. So. And Mike made that same point where he sort of said that if carbs induce a feeling of that, like I'm very all or nothing when it comes to dieting. So if I have some carbs, I'm going to need all the carbs. So better just to remove carbs completely out of the equation and not fool myself into thinking that I need carbs for fuel, because that's where I can increase the fats. Fats and protein are always naturally more satiating. So if you got to kind of identify your own mindset and know yourself a little bit, be your own guru at the end of the day, and don't just rely on the fact of cliched scientific recommendations that you need the carbs, because you don't need the carbs when you're dieting.
Well, you don't.
Take them out.
It's not an essential nutrient, and most of them are inflammatory anyway. So
correct.
Just go figure.
Yeah. Well, let's move on to somebody now that actually hates Mike Israetel with a passion. I suppose along with every other influencer in the space. And we touched on this guy last week, but he had another video that was quite topical and I thought bared commenting on, and that was Bart K. Cardio is bad.
That's right.
The average person and most athletes, and certainly hypertrophy athletes, should absolutely not do cardio. It's not because you're gaining more muscle fibers. You're not. You're gaining bigger ones by training them to be bigger. That's how you get hypertrophy happening. If you do hours and hours and hours of cardio for years and years and years, the actual heart muscle gets bigger, and it gets so big that it starts interfering with its own function.
Cardio is going to inhibit or hinder muscle growth. That's correct?
Yes.
Really? Wow.
Yes. Don't do drop sets. That's a dumb idea. Drop sets are about volume, and hypertrophy training is not about volume.
So what do you think? I know that you've used cardio in the past.
I know.
Are we going to write cardio off and throw the baby out with the bathwater, or do you think that bodybuilding, cardio has a place in bodybuilding?
Well, Bart was fantastic once again. He is, talk about moth to a flame. I mean, he's very alluring with his extremely confident approach, the way he sort of carves people a new one. It's hilarious. But there's a lot of things there that he was talking about that I would agree with. My views on cardio are ever changing. I would like to go back to, more walking rather than, the zone 2 cardio that he despises. And that's what he was talking about. Bart was really looking at that cardio that's, 80 to 90% of that 220 minus your age, that formula, the high intensity cardio, where your heart rate is more than 130, 140 beats a minute for a sustained period. But what we do know is that does raise cortisol. It does raise cortisol, and in time, if done long term, there's a lot of marathon runners that end up getting those pacemakers put in later on in life because they get atrial fibrillation and all sorts of cardiac problems. So it does put a tremendous stress on the heart. He explains, he's a professor in biology and nutritional science, and so he was explaining that the heart does get enlarged, and that causes malfunction. So there's cardiac risks with that zone 2 cardio for a sustained period of time, and that's there.
Yeah, but this is where we enter, the kind of fragile zone of when we're talking about bodybuilding. Because I remember back in a very old podcast, one of the big names in the space made an interesting comment, and he says, that's kind of always stuck with me. He said that there's no such thing at any level as healthy bodybuilding. Now, that one would actually kind of bear some reflection, because when you think about what we're doing, it's very antithetical to the processes of what the body wants to do when it comes to building muscle and losing fat. And if you think going against those inclinations and processes is healthy, well, you need to reflect a little bit more. But when it comes to Bart's claims about cardio being bad, or zone 2, or some of his other more wild takes like calories don't matter, again, I sort of think, because he trots out this very scientific, very persuasive and convincing argument about how calories are a complete misconstrue of the science of what we think of them as are. And, calories in food are not this mathematical equation that we can reliably depend on, because calories are so wildly off in terms of the representation.
They're hard to measure. Very hard to measure.
But, again, it goes back to that precision that bodybuilders can rely on, that if they follow a structured calorie deficit, they're going to achieve the physique on a particular day at a particular time that has been proven again and again, thousands, maybe millions of times over. And again, he always comes back to carbs are not needed for bodybuilding. And while I don't think that carbs are necessary when it comes to the health equation of having the best health, I'm going to disagree and sort of say carbs are definitely at some stage, like it or not, for maximizing the potential of your physique on stage on the day or a look that you're trying to achieve. They're definitely part of the equation.
Yeah, well, and he actually said he did qualify everything that he spoke about with carbs and fats and cardio and all that sort of thing. He said if you want to be stupidly over muscled, he said, well then carbs might sort of do the trick for you. But
and there's his criticism straight away, because Bart doesn't look like a picture of health and fitness by any means. Let's see. I think he's posted a few pictures with his shirt off. He looks dog shit. Come on, let's face it. I think he's probably younger than you, maybe around about the same age as me. And I don't want to fucking look like Bart K. That's for certain. So when it comes to his recommendations for bodybuilding, I'm sorry, I'm checked out of what he has to say. Maybe for a healthy or a lifestyle perspective, Bart might be on the money, but I think he's also in the weeds when it comes to his interpretation and application of the science in this matter. And like I said, when we're bodybuilders, we make trade-offs for our health at the end of the day, for our short-term project, or maybe long-term, for if you're going to talk about guys like you and me, of what we want to achieve physique-wise. But there's a trade-off. We might not want to live to 100. Maybe 85 is good enough at the end of the day, and we'll take the physique of our dreams along with that package. Yeah,
that's right. I look, at the end of the day, it sort of convinced me and reassured me that really the type of cardio that's worked best for me over the years that I should get back into is walking. It always worked well, and then I think that step count idea sort of ties in with that as well. So I'll probably keep looking at my watch a bit, but Bart certainly not adverse to walking at all. He seems to think that's okay, and so that's the only problem with my last prep that I couldn't walk is I hurt my knee, so I had to use the bloody life cycle, and my heart rate was getting up there. So I'm looking forward to competing again, walking, and I think hopefully, my physique will bounce back a bit more. Because a
lot of pros seem to be really big on this. The I don't know what it's called, like the stepper or the step mill, where they sort of think that it helps bring in their glutes and legs a little bit more. I'm not sure if that's a little bit of bro science, but what do you think?
Well, I think because Bart was saying how the zone 2 cardio is quite catabolic, and you have the problem with muscle loss. And he explained that quite well. And I would have thought that the high intensity, have you ever done the step mill? Your heart rate goes through the roof. I reckon for me, I mean, I like to try and hang on to my leg mass as it is at nearly 60. I don't want to be catabolic, losing all my hard-earned mass on that thing. But your heart rate gets really high, 140, 150 on that. Bart would be, I think if we asked Bart about the step mill, he would just, oh boy, there'd be a few expletives come out, wouldn't there?
Where I have found that cardio is actually really useful, and especially the 10-minute walks like Stamina, Efferdine, postprandial recommend are just absolutely brilliant. If you want to feel really good, especially when you have taken in some carbs, go for that 10-minute walk and see how much better your energy and mindset settle straight after a carb meal. It's almost like essential if you want to have any carbs. But I found cardio is actually almost the best when you include it in a mass phase to stimulate hunger. If you do it like first thing at the beginning of the day, it induces that hunger response. But also, especially when you're trying to quote unquote bulk and add in extra calories, which can be quite uncomfortable done day after day, month after month in bodybuilding. So when you're doing cardio immediately after those meals, I find that's when it's best suited.
Oh, absolutely. I always found that doing cardio on an empty stomach first thing in the morning, I felt good, but by geez, I was ready to eat after that. So it is a great way to stimulate metabolism and your appetite. But at the end of the day, I was always taught that that's the way to go. If your your insulin levels are low, you can use your fat reserves for energy, and away you go.
Because I can't imagine doing cardio, especially any high intensity cardio, on a severe calorie cut for a contest. I never have done any cardio for any of my contest preps. I've always come in peeled and dry on the day, so I've never found it's been needed. And also, like you said, it induces a large amount of catabolism when you're in a dietary restriction phase. So, for that, maybe cardio doesn't have a huge place. I think if you're paying catch up and you need to get that fat off a little bit quicker. But like Mike says, cardio is such a poor investment for the results it yields because it burns off so little food, and you can't out-train a shitty diet at the end of the day. So if you're trying to make up for your crappy indulgences with a bit of cardio, you're shooting yourself in the foot.
Yeah, true. Yeah.
How about we move on to the next topic, which we're going to interject a few little hypotheticals each week and some Q&As, because I always like your physique analysis. So I was thinking about this week talking about our comparative lists for our top 5 favorite lat spreads of all time. And I know that we've got differing lists. I sort of don't necessarily have technically the top 5, but I think of more of my iconic top 5, maybe as in comparison to yours. So who do you have at number 1?
Well, when you sent me this text that you wanted to look at the best 5, and I think it's the front lat spread, isn't it, that we're interested in?
Front lat spread, yes.
Well, when you sent me that, I was rubbing my hands with glee. I thought, this is fantastic. But then I had to think. I had to really think. And so my top 5 covers, obviously over a few different decades. But number 1, obviously, you call me the Dorian Yates nut hugger. But the DY,
your DNA is a Brit.
Yeah, no, but that front lat spread of his was just mind-boggling, and especially back in sort of 92, 93, 94, before the distension. The way he hit the post too, he hit it perfectly. But that short torso, those long legs, he turned his feet out, and you see those massive calves. He just had, it was sensational, and you could just see the lats just hanging down, which a lot of guys, their rib cage hides their lats. But he had the delts. His short biceps were nothing because his forearms were so incredible. So the forearms sort of covered up the shortness in his biceps. So
I'm going to controversially challenge you before you spend an hour talking about your love of Dorian Yates' front lat spread. But I always thought Dorian's front lat spread, of course, it was undeniable and poetically beautiful, but it always looked so impressive simply because his other body parts were so glaringly deficient. He didn't have great legs. He had a thick waist. He had shitty arms. He had beautiful calves as well. But when I think number 1's, when you've got strong body parts all over the place, you can't go past Ronnie Coleman. But you told me that he had some problems hitting the pose, and I'm going to always defer to you because you're the posing master, that Ronnie didn't do the pose didn't do the pose properly. So can you elucidate on that for the audience?
Well, it was pretty close. But what he did was it was kind of like Marcus Rulish back in the day, where the neck and chin would sink down into his collarbone, and he'd lose his neck and he'd lose his shoulder width. And Ronnie didn't have fantastic delts anyway. They got better towards the end. But the delts play a big part of the front lat spread. So his neck would sink down. He'd be all bunched up, and he'd look like this massive muscle, and you could see the lats. But then he had that big separated abdominal wall, which was a bit of a spectre to look at as well. But yeah, it was all there. I mean, one thing that was very impressive with Ronnie Coleman's front lat spread was his chest. His chest his striations was just mind-bending, and the big arms, but he didn't have those big caps on the delts to give him the width. He lost the width because his neck was sunk into his, his chin was sunk into his collarbone like Marcus Raw used to do. So it's a marvel of muscle, and it still would be, I'd still be 6 or 7 on my list if we went to top 10. But I just think he could have dropped his shoulders a bit, lifted his chin up a little bit more. Maybe dropped his hands a little bit lower, punched into the sides even more than he was to try and push that waist in, and have his hands just a little bit below that bottom rib, and drop the shoulders. And it might have looked a little bit better for me, but I'm just been a bit OCD with that, I'm afraid. Yeah.
Number 2, who have you got?
Well, Dennis Wolf. People sort of forget, but by jingoes, did he have an X-frame? I mean, okay, his calves disappeared, and we know that, but he had this billowing quads that just flared out, so that created the bottom part of the X. But he had the giant shoulders, great pecs, and he had high lats, very, very high lats. But from the front, they looked fantastic, and his waist was small. So he had what an X-frame that was, and he knew how to hit that pose, and he was very confident when he hit it. He knew he was turning heads when he hit that pose. So I think Dennis Wolf was sensational, and it's pretty close between him and Dorian actually. And I think I sent you a photo. But
for my number two, I'm going to, without too much elucidation, I'm just going to say Dorian again, iconic. What more can be added? How about number three?
Well, we spoke about him last week. There was that photo of him on the street in his jeans doing the front lat spread, and that was Lee Haney. Man, what a front lat spread and rear lat spread that he had. You could see those lats tie right down low. He had the pecs, the arms. It didn't matter because the forearms covered up, little gap up, as I said before. So he got away with that, and he had pretty good shoulders. So, and he struck it beautifully, perfectly executed. So, and he had a great small waist with and he could suck that waist. He could suck the guts in under the rib cage. Perfect.
Yeah, technically, I probably would put Lee Haney as well, but just to be a little bit different and for a comparison, a modern day comparison of someone that I thought hit the pose really well and also looked stunningly magnificent in this pose was Brandon Curry.
Oh yeah, true. Yeah,
I'm not even going to talk about the technical aspects of his poses because I can't. So if you want to add anything about Brandon, otherwise we'll always move on to 4.
No, I would agree with you. Upper body, just his lower body just not being as gnarly and not this quads being not quite matching the upper body. That was the only thing. But upper body wise, fantastic front lat spread. Great genetics, great shape.
Number 4.
Well, a blast from the past, and I think, correct me if I'm wrong, but this could take us back to the late 80s and early 90s, and that's Andreas Munzer, the original shredder. By geez, his lats inserted down on his hips, and because he was so shrink wrapped, and he had a really good abdominal wall and insanely striated pecs. If you hit that front lat spread properly, you can really bring out the striations in your pecs. He had great arms, great delts. Legs were phenomenal. Striations, and separated, and the X-frame with that was fantastic. So he was right up there. Brilliant front lat spread. And the young viewers that don't know anything about him need to look him up because it was a sight to behold, I can tell you.
Yeah, it never stood out to me that he had a great front lat spread, so it was interesting inclusion on your list. For my number 4, I had, and I'm kind of going for more the iconic best front lat spreads rather than the best technically analyzable front lat spreads. And my number 4 would be Reg Park.
Oh, yes.
Yeah, just beautifully classic in every way. Iconic for the ages. Better than Arnold's, that's for certain.
Well, you know what? Reg Park was Arnold Schwarzenegger's idol. So, there you go. A lot of people don't realise that. He was also my dad's idol, Reg Park. My dad came from the same neck of the woods as Reg.
Well, he was the Dorian of the day because he was the one the Brits could turn to before Dorian usurped his throne. So even though he lived in South Africa.
Yeah, that's right. Yeah. So good choice, that one. I like it.
Number 5.
Well, we spoke of the man before, and we spoke about his structure, and that's Chris Bumstead. I'm telling you, his front lat spread. They don't. The funny thing, the wacky thing is, Sean, they don't call it. They don't call the front lat spread in classic bodybuilding. Why? I do not know. That's one of my biggest beefs. It's a classic pose.
Because Arnold couldn't hit it. See, in classic bodybuilding is a personification representation of what Arnold's supposed to be, and because Arnold didn't do that pose, do they do a side tricep in classic physique? I don't think they do they? I've never seen it. Again, that was another pose that Arnold couldn't hit.
Side chest, they do. Yeah, that's right.
Side chest, but not side tricep.
Yeah, so I'm glad you've suggested something because for the life of me, I'm trying to figure out why front lat spread is not a classic pose because it's just. But Chris Bumstead's, he always works it in. He always works it into his routine, his front lat spread, and then he'll do the one arm, the teapot sort of front lat spread with one arm down, one arm up, and that looks brilliant too. And he'll sort of look to the side, but he's got the perfect structure, that waist, and he just knows how to hit it. So
Yeah.
and he's short.
Yeah,
And once
those
again, his
pictures-
short biceps don't matter.
Those pictures that you've included with Chris Bumstead here, they're definitely phenomenal. But when I watch Chris Bumstead's posing routines, they never really moved me so much. But when you see them in the still frames, you sort of think, wow, that's so iconic and for the ages. He hits them well. I just don't think he's very performative and interesting to watch on stage. But a lot of these guys aren't these days.
No.
My number 5, just to move things along, I'm going to go for another throwback. Probably, again, not technically perfect, but Sergio Oliva.
Oh, yes.
Just when he hit that lats, geez, that was just next level for the age.
Well, it was the size of the arms, the mass in the lats, but also his pecs. His pecs would be off the charts. It's hard for your pecs to look good in front lats, but when they do, it's an impressive thing. So, and he had that 28-inch waist, 56-inch chest, as they quoted back in the day, with 28-inch thighs. So he had the big X frame, didn't he? But
I bet your Arnold quickly transitioned into another pose when that one was called, because he didn't want to be sidling up to Sergio with it. Just to move it along as well, Craig, I'm going to include an honorary mention because there was just so many people to put on this list, and we could go all day, I guess. So also, if you're watching in the comments, throw your favorite lat spreads of all time in there. But I'm going to have to put Bruce Lee on there for iconic lat spreads. He's technically not a bodybuilder, but I think when people saw that, especially when it came on film before bodybuilders were even a thing in film, people probably looked at that and had their minds blown and probably gravitated towards some training simply because Bruce Lee was the representation of muscularity for that time.
Look, Sean, I couldn't agree with you more. I've seen that image, and people back in the day would look and go, "What are those things hanging down under it?" That people didn't know what those muscles were. So Bruce Lee first introduced us to the lats. So if you're going to talk best front lat spreads, and by the way, he wasn't doing it; he was just standing there with his arms by his side. But it was freakish, wasn't it? But he introduced us to lats. I think we can.
Or even Dorian Yates and many others, including Flex Wheeler, point towards Bruce Lee as being one of their biggest inspirations back in the day. So he's definitely up there. So let's move on. Let's move on with the topics because we are losing a little bit of time, mate.
No worries. Yep.
One of the other things that I wanted to talk about in this hypotheticals is, who do you like better? Because I think a lot of people hold the Flex Wheeler of 1993, particularly with that Arnold Classic showing, as being probably one of the greatest Flex Wheelers of all time. So a lot of the time it was Flex Wheeler versus Flex Wheeler, and he showed us various array of incarnations of his physique over the years that he competed. But what I want to ask you is, what do you like better, the best flex of 92 or the best flex of, say, 99?
It's a great question. I do recall the way he looked in 98, 99, when he expected to beat Ronnie, particularly in 98, and he was a lot bigger. But the synthol artist had weaved the magic with flex, and he was starting to look a bit cartoonish and starting to lose that gnarliness to the muscle and the stripy delts, as Giles Tiger Thomas talks about from the UK. But then you go back to pictures of him in 93, but particularly, as you said, surprisingly, when he won the USA's in 92, wow, that was before synthol, and what a physique! He still had his hair, the tiny waist.
That counts for a lot, I reckon. When the guys have their hair, they just have a different radiant look to them.
Oh, he did. And he sported that little moustache,
So good looking. Yeah. No homo.
Yeah, that's right. But he just had that grainy, separated look to the muscle. Wasn't blurred by any use of, obviously, maybe insulin, but then synthol. So I think there was a totally different look. And a lot of these bodybuilders, we spoke about this, a lot of these bodybuilders, and we can rattle off a whole bunch of them, they feel now, having retired and moved away from the sport, that their best look was when they were smaller. They sort of harken back.
I think with Flex, Flex always referred to his later version of his physique being the best.
Did he really?
I might be wrong. So if I am wrong, and he has quoted it somewhere else, pick me up in the comments by all means.
Well, I was just going to say, he lost his mind in 1998 because he was the favourite to win the Olympia when Yates retired in 97, and he Oh, he was beating his chest like a gorilla. It was very it was a very sore loser. And Ronnie went down, bawling his eyes out. But so he's probably still thinking that he should have won that maybe in 98, 99. But Ronnie was just
I
peeled
can almost
inside
make
out.
a case for it because Ronnie had some shitty gyno. I know
he
Ronnie
did.
had
Oh, yeah.
transformed, but I still think maybe Flex could have taken the edge over Ronnie in that contest if I was going for just an aesthetic presentation of physique.
I think you're right, but then when they turn to the back, that's where Flex, from the waist down, from the back. What about that iconic bit of footage? I think it was in '99 where they turned to the back. Flex Wheelers looked down at Ronnie Coleman's backside and hamstrings, just as a bit of byplay. But it's the worst thing he should have ever done because Ronnie in '99, those glutes were from another planet, and Flex was off. He was soft. So that must have completely, messed his mind up when he did that. And people still talk about that bit of footage to today. So,
yeah, well, Flex has actually come out, and Flex was known as a bit of an egomaniac and very arrogant at the time. But Flex had also sort of said, well, look how I would always try subconsciously to take the judges' eyes off me and then point or touch the other competitors in almost like a referential, subconscious, self-sabotaging way, and sort of saying to the judges, hey, look at this guy. He's better than me, so don't pick me.
Yeah, well, it certainly it was a bit cringeworthy to watch at the time.
Yeah, because Flex and success, it was set up for him, but he was his own worst enemy at the end of the day. That's why I sort of kicked off this segment by saying it was always Flex versus Flex.
It was.
And
Chris Cormier recently was on Dennis James's podcast and would say that Flex was constantly cheating on his diet. He really, really struggled. And so
lazy trainer. He was another one that just tried to let genetics do the hard work for him and the heavy lifting. Whereas Dorian Yates said that if Flex Wheeler was any more committed, even half as much committed as him, then Flex probably would have beaten him. But Dorian had the work ethic. And that transitions really well into our next topic, the final hypothetical I want to ask you for this week. Who had the better work ethic? Was it Ronnie Coleman or was it Dorian Yates? And I'm just talking work ethic, no lat spread comparisons.
Well, I've had a long, hard think about this since you posed the question, and you know that I'm a fan of the DY, but I'm going to go for Ronnie on this one, for the simple reason that and I've watched all of his DVDs. Ronnie, I used to watch them, when I was doing cardio. Watched Yates's Blood and Guts over and over as well, and having looked at both of them, what Ronnie did at Metroflex Gym in that heat, with that high volume training, basically training every day. And there was no air conditioning. I mean, Yates would be training for 1 hour tops 3 or 4 times a week. That was it. And yeah, it was balls to the wall training and it was great to watch. But I still shake my head the way Ronnie used to shake his sweat off his head, in those workouts, and think, how did he not sort of have a heat stroke or something? It was
and on top of that, Craig, on top of that, as somebody put it quite ironically amusing last week in the Jamie podcast. So Dorian used to train 45 minutes, 3 or 4 times a week. They asked, and this person was a Brit as well. They said, what the fuck was he doing with the rest of his time?
Yeah, that's right. I know.
Whereas Ronnie was also working full-time night shifts, doing cardio at 3 a.m., working as a police officer. So if you want to talk about work ethic that was second to none, Ronnie actually was very inspirational to me when I read that, because we had always been growing up and raised that bodybuilders were lazy bums and they didn't work jobs because it wasn't compatible with bodybuilding. But Ronnie showed me that you could still put in a hard day's graft at the quote unquote office, but also live life doing night shifts. And when everything was apparently stacked against him, and still achieve the results that he did. So a testament to his grind.
Yeah. Well, you've hit on something there that is very pertinent to the question. And if you want something done, ask a busy person. I mean, Ronnie was just, and the other thing, apparently he's really, really intelligent and he's a really good writer. So he used to like to write.
You lost me there.
No, well, apparently, he used to have an article that he used to write for some publication. I can't remember. He's written a book since, but I know when he talks, you wouldn't think that. But what?
Yeah.
Yeah, definitely tremendous work ethic. I've got to I'll take my hat off to him. And what was going on in that Metroflex gym was mind bending, wasn't it? And it was great to watch. Yeah. So
Yeah. Yeah. That's
kudos
it.
to Ronnie.
And
Good old Ronnie.
there's a lot of criticisms that I might have with Ronnie, but I think, just for this, we'll tip the hat to his work ethic, and it's never seen anything like it in terms of, like you said, fucking just showing up day after day, week. The volume and the frequency that man and the weights that he consistently handled, even in contest prep, without doing any fucking damage. What was that? A few weeks out and he's deadlifting 800 pounds. What the fuck?
I mean, talk about HIT training, but his was heavyweight and high volume, and high reps. So
his was like Dorian's training on steroids, multiplied by more multipliers.
That's right. I agree. Yeah. But a really good question. But we'll definitely salute Ronnie Coleman for that one. Yeah.
The last topic that I want to move into today with your good self is a video from a guy that I think definitely needs a little bit more recognition for the great content that he puts out. And this guy is just a fantastic member of the community. He's very positive. He's been doing this for a long time. So he's not one of those flash in the pan, not necessarily to hate on the younger influencers in this space, but that is Faz Lifts. And I think that he made a really good video in this one about progressive overload not working for you. And because we're constantly sold this surefire way for progress that if you just beat the logbook and show up each time and add weight on the bar or reps in the tank, that there is no more guaranteed way to build your body and to make progress at the end of the day, which, has its solid foundations in theory, but Faz argues that it's a little bit more nuanced than this. And a lot of people love this video, and I took a lot away from it myself. But what did you think of Faz?
Progressive overload is to blame. You followed everyone's instructions, all the big guys, you Dante Trudell, you Mike Mensa, Dorian Yates, you added weight to the bar, you got stronger. Somewhere along the way, you got completely obsessed with adding weight to the bar. That's all that mattered. Getting that one more rep, adding that 5 more pounds to the bar. And eventually, you woke up, you looked in the mirror, you realized you weren't any bigger at all.
Well, I think he's just hit on what all the top pros are doing now and what they spoke about many, many years ago. To be a champion, you've got to get that mind-to-muscle connection. So he talks about not just progressive overload, but he harkens on about progression criteria. And progression criteria is the criteria by which you hold to each rep as you perform the rep. That is, the tempo, the actual stretch, the quality of the movement. You're not bouncing it. So the actual quality of the rep and being able to really get your mind into the muscle is equally as important as the weight that you actually put on the bar. And so, yes, it's important to try to gradually lift heavier, but you don't have to be putting an extra 2 kilos on the bar every week, as long as you're getting that. You're getting your mind into the muscle via the rep tempo and all the rest of it, that progression criteria. And the way you described it was really well done. So good on you, Faz. I think you did well there, and I really enjoyed that little chat. But it basically just falls in the lap of the way that these pros are training these days, because they don't want to snap tendons as the pros did in the past with the crazy lifts and bouncing the weights off the chest and things like that.
Funnily enough, and I'll interject with this because I had a little bit of an off-topic back and forth with Faz, and the guy was he used to be a teacher as well. So I was a teacher, you're a teacher, Jamie Lewis was a teacher. It's so funny how some of the best information communicators in this game have that teaching background. And I think that really speaks to Faz, because he didn't present this convoluted word salad. He broke down the concepts very simply, very easily, with massive amounts of clarity and explanation, and also example, because Faz definitely practiced what he preaches. And what I liked about his interjection of performance criteria is, like you said, staying in the pocket for a few weeks and earning that weight that you've put on the bar.
That's right.
But not only earning the weight, but dominating the weight. Because if you are searching for this futile add weight or add reps at all costs, you are going to dig yourself into a grave of frustration at the end of the day, because it's simply not possible to keep adding weight and adding reps linearly over time.
That's right.
And a lot of
Yep.
these short-minded people that think that if they're not constantly progressing, beating the weight, beating the logbook,
Yep.
making progress, they think that, wow, this is a fucking waste of time. And then they move on to a next program.
That's right. I
Or
know.
different, and they spin their wheels for years without just know that this is a journey and it's a long-term game. Like I said, you've got to stay with the weight after until it becomes every set and every rep becomes a picture of perfection in
That's
terms of
right.
its execution.
Look,
And
I
obviously, he made the difference. I'll just add very quickly that this isn't
Yeah.
powerlifting, where
That's right.
powerlifting is only focused on the progression markers, which is adding weight over time. They don't give a fuck how they leverage that weight up. It's in their interest to almost cheat
That's
it
right.
up through their various techniques that they use. But I just thought this was a great video for anybody that is sometimes frustrated by
Yeah.
not making progress continuously week after week. And this is a patience and a long-term game that you need to stay with.
Yeah, look, I think you're absolutely right. I agree with you 1,000% there. And so people, for those that are getting disillusioned, they need to listen to what Faz was talking about. It's the modern trend anyway, and it makes a lot of sense. But at the end of the day, a quote of his that I thought was really interesting, and that this can be applied for those people that are overthinking things with their training with progressive overload. And he said, "Do the work, focus on the quality, and wait for the adaptation to occur." I thought, yep, I like that. I think that's people just need to focus on that and run
The
with
key
it.
words there being focus and wait. And people
Yes.
are not willing to focus,
I know,
and they are not willing to wait.
I know,
So then,
but
they turn to the gear on their third week at the gym and they
Yeah.
get that shit jammed in, and then, fucking let the disaster ensue.
well,
But
then the sport's not for you if that's the case. Catch you later.
100%, because this is a marathon and not a sprint.
That's right.
And if you look at someone that even was big on progressive overload and adding weight over time, someone like Dorian Yates, every set and every rep was picture perfect, and you
that's
cannot
right.
fault that man's execution of the weights.
No, that's
So
right.
again, I don't know if you've got too much more to add to that, but I just wanted to give Faz props for what he's doing in his space of YouTube. He's one of those influencers that the view count and also the subscribers don't fully reflect the quality of the information that he's pulling out. But I can see
That's
that
right.
in time, he's going to be one of those big channels that will blow up. And I fully recommend that anybody that follows these influencers to check out Faz's stuff. The links are always in the description, and definitely subscribe and watch his material.
Yeah, keep up the good work, Faz. That was great. Well done.
It'd be great to have him on sometime and have a chat, because I think we're all very like-minded in the philosophy, similar amongst ourselves to how to get the best bang for our buck with our training. And Faz is on board with a lot of concepts. And I think, I could see us even learning a few new tricks from the guy.
Oh, for sure. Yeah. I'd be very happy to have a chinwag with the guy. Definitely.
I think that's all we got time for this week, mate. So I think we need to wrap it up there. Had a fantastic discussion once again. It's amazing how quick these weeks just fly by, and before you know it, we've had to come up with. I thought it was going to be a bit of a dry week in bodybuilding, to be honest.
No,
I was clutching at straws for some good content, but it never fails to deliver, or by not disappointing at the end. We can always latch onto a few pieces that we can discuss. And thanks again for joining me, because I love doing these.
Yeah, me too. And thanks again, Sean. I look forward to the next one. And people need to check out your channel, Carved Out of Stone. It's the coolest channel at the moment on social media. So check it out, everyone.
I don't know about that, mate, but by the same token, we're just
stuff.
here to show up, and we love the people that get in the comments and give us a little bit of support. I'm not big on self-promotion, but when you do leave a comment, we love to check them out. It keeps us going, and we try to get back to everybody as well, because it's all about the community at the end of the day. We're not just these faceless guys that dismiss the comments and never reply. So we get around to you eventually. So let us know your thoughts or any other topics that you might want us to touch in the future. If you have any other videos that we might have missed, because we depend on what the algorithm feeds us at the end of the day as well. So once again, also check out Craig's Instagram. He is a posing connoisseur and a technically proficient, brilliant guy that can work out any posing issues that you might have. He's available for coaching and for mentorship, consultations. So make sure you check out his Instagram. Thanks again for joining us, Craig, and we'll see you next week.
Good on you, buddy. See you, Sean.